So, a lot of the job search can be very scary for someone who's naturally introverted. We talk a lot about attending networking events and talking with strangers or reaching out to hiring managers and recruiters that you don't know, or even the interview itself, where it can be difficult to be outspoken and assertive and describing yourself. So, as an introvert, can you describe some of the challenges you had in your job search?
For sure. Just talking to people in general, was the first hurdle to kinda get over. So I actually got really lucky, and, I'll talk about that in a little bit, but I had a mentor who helped me get over that a lot. And then just the idea of networking was completely foreign to me, coming from a teaching background, that's not something you really do. So I had to really work on that quite a bit. Um, yeah, really just every aspect of the job search, I kind of needed guidance along the way, so
Well, you're not the only one to have gone through that, and ultimately, you made it happen. Congratulations on getting your new role just a few months ago.
thank you.
So let's talk about some of those specific challenges. You mentioned you worked with a mentor.
I did.
What was some of the advice that you got from your mentor, and how did you apply that to get more comfortable in this?
So my mentor, he really helped me target my job search. So he helped me, kind of know what to look for in companies and then like how to contact the managers, maybe some like different like things I could say when I'm approaching someone. And then he really helped me with the interview process. So I'm not good at talking to strangers generally anyway. So he just kind of got me over that because he was a stranger at the beginning. This was a mentorship program where I just got paired up randomly with someone. So that was already scary. But then, he helped me shape kind of my story, my elevator pitch. That helped quite a bit. And just encouraged me to even just reach out to other developers and do like those coffee chats and all of that. That really helped kind of ease me in and get me used to talking to people.
So did it all kind of become easier for you with that practice, or did you find that you had to maybe ignore certain job search advice, like certain networking types of networking, because that just didn't align with what you're comfortable with, and instead focus on something else? Or yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
So for me, I was still able to pretty much do all of those things. Meetups were not something that was very easy for me just because of where I'm located. I'm in a very rural area, so there's not really any meetups that you can do. I did a couple of virtual ones, that was okay, and that was less scary, I think, than going in person. So that might be an option for people. Um, and I would say, yeah, I was able to focus on most of it and just get used to it over time. I think the more I did it, the more comfortable I became. And I just think that's really something you have to do is just kind of be comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes.
Yeah, and getting comfortable with failure. I know at least for me,
Mhm.
when I first started putting myself out there and posting online, my first few hundred posts maybe
Yeah.
absolutely sucked.
Mhm.
Um, but you kind of learn what your voice is. You kind of find your own niche, and it becomes more comfortable. And
For
it
sure.
becomes more comfortable over time.
For sure.
So, what was the sequence of events that led to the job that you had now?
So I had been posting online and I had just actually gotten laid off for my first contract. So I was posting online. I was trying to build this big project in public to kind of display the things that I had learned on my first contract. So I was putting posts out of just updates on what was going on with that, trying to kind of leave that evidence behind, like David Roberts always talks about.
Mhm.
And so from there, I started targeting my job search to things that were closer to me. Like I said, I'm in kind of a rural area, but there is a small city like an hour away. So I targeted stuff in that area. And I ended up finding a couple hybrid roles over there. They said they were hybrid, but once I actually interviewed at both of those places, they both said that they were willing to go pretty much full remote. So I got really lucky on that one, not having to drive an hour back and forth every day. But so I interviewed with both of them, and it actually ended up taking 5 interviews, with the place that I ended up getting a job at, which is called Keller Schrader. It's right here.
All right.
Yeah, so
Repping the brand.
yeah, of course.
If you're struggling in your job search, today's episode is sponsored by refactorcoaching.com. With over 43 combined years of tech and coaching experience, they can help you land offers and gain career clarity, even for introverts. And listeners can get 10% off their networking workshop, but you'll have to act fast as their next session is December 5th. So just use the link you see here or in the show notes to get started. That application that led to the first interview, is that somebody reaching out to you because of the build in public that you were doing, or is that an application you sent out,
It was
then
just an
they agreed to
application I ended
interview?
up sending out, and I thought
Okay,
that I would have maybe less competition since they needed to be closer to
okay.
that job since it was listed hybrid.
Mhm.
So I started with that, and then I had that like initial phone screen, and it kind of went from there.
So as you're preparing for that first interview, I assume you were rather nervous, right? Especially we talk about that your introvert, natural introvert nature.
Mhm.
So as you went through these 5 different interviews with 5 different groups of people with 5 different expectations and
Mhm.
5 different formats, 5 different types of questions, how did you build up the confidence and make sure that you could show up and represent yourself effectively?
So I say the first thing to being less nervous and kind of going with that introvert side of me is to be as prepared as possible. So I, researched the company like they always tell you to. I was looking on Glassdoor because, sometimes they'll post like interview questions and things like that. But then they also were very good and very transparent with the process. So I got lucky there that they told me what it was going to look like, what type of interview each one was, even like a time frame. I think it'll take this long. Like they really spelled it out. And so I feel like that made me way more prepared as an introvert. And to me, being prepared is like just it makes it so much easier, the whole process.
Yeah, it's half the battle. And a lot of
Mhm.
people don't realize that you're allowed to ask questions about the interview process.
Right.
Like you can ask the recruiter, when they're inviting you for an interview, who am I talking to? What's their position in the company? What type of interview to expect? Because part of the secret here is if you know what type of interview to expect, you know exactly how to prepare. Because as you mentioned, some questions are on Glassdoor,
Mhm. But
but
then there's also just banks of questions out there too that you can find, right? So
absolutely.
I definitely found those, and shout out to 100 Devs. I don't know how much people talk about that on here, but he even has this whole bank of questions of just like behavioral questions and even some sample answers that you can go and just like study if you wanted to. And that could be super helpful.
That's the secret of the interview is that it's kind of an open book test because just to
Mhm.
paint a little bit picture here as being somebody who's interviewed developers coming in, um, you're as a hiring manager, you're probably overworked. That's why you're hiring. Your team is understaffed. You're desperate to hire somebody new. You're probably split between multiple teams trying to chase down answers, and you have your day to day job. And then, oh my gosh, this interview with a candidate lands on your calendar from the recruiter. So maybe if you're lucky, 5 minutes before the interview, you sit down and you think, which team is this position for? Oh, okay. This is the React team. This is the backend team. Okay. Let me Google top React software engineering questions, top Node.js interview
Right.
questions. And I mean, that's not every hiring manager, but I would say it's enough that it's common. And especially for a hiring manager that has not been a developer for a while, they may have some coding experience from years before, but they're probably not up to date with the latest, right?
Mhm. Right.
So they're going to want to know what the answers are too if they're going to ask a specific question. So they're going online, typing in, top React interview questions. They're using some resource that has the answers so they can verify it. And you can do that exact same search
Yep.
before your interview, and maybe get 50% of your answers prepared, so
Mhm.
you don't have to really worry about getting them answering them well on the fly.
Yeah. But I would say for me, the secret sauce was also just coffee chat. So it got me used to talking about being a developer. It got me used to asking the other person questions and, like that elevator pitch that I talked about. You kind of introduce yourselves at the beginning. So you kind of give like a version of that. And just getting used to talking about what you're working on, stuff like that. Cause that came up obviously in the interview as well, was, things that I had worked on. So I was already used to talking about those in coffee chats and by building in public. I was writing about them. So
Where were you finding these coffee chats?
everywhere. I
Everywhere.
would
So,
just
okay.
I would just add software developers, like, at random on LinkedIn, which I know they tell you kinda not to do that, but I do it anyway, and I add the note, I do that part like you're supposed to, but, just naturally, after adding the note, sometimes you end up chatting afterwards, and so, like, one or the other would ask for a coffee chat, and I would just coffee chat with I tried to get, like, a couple a week at least, and it just
Okay.
that repetition helps, you get
Yeah,
used to
you're
all
you're
that.
telling your story, you're practicing your
Mhm.
elevator pitch. You're getting more and more comfortable with, when it matters,
Yeah.
right? Uh, I would even say when it comes to for similar reasons, when it comes to the companies you're applying for, don't necessarily apply to your dream job or ideal one first because you're gonna suck in your first few interviews as you get a
Right.
feel for the format of it. And
Mhm.
it would be horrible for you to kind of burn the bridge of the one opportunity you're super excited about on your first interview.
Right, for sure.
All right, so that was so we had 5 interviews though. So we've talked high level. There were some behavioral interviews, some technical interviews. What did you talk about in these 5 different interviews? What was the
So
audience of these?
yeah, so they were obviously with different people. So the first one was just, a phone screen with, an HR person, and so we just went through a few general, like, behavioral questions and kind of she just gave me more info about the job and all the things with that, and then kind of gave me the next steps. So from there, the one of the staff managers at my job, she was actually in all of the rest of the interview. So it was kind of cool because again, as an introvert, it's nice to have that familiarity with someone.
Yeah.
So she actually was in all the rest of them. And so she asked me some behavioral questions. It was a lot deeper interview on the second one. And then, obviously my project comes up throughout that interview. And so then my technical interview was the next one. Sorry. So it was with her and then some of the tech leads. And so we just went deep dive into that project. I showed them how it worked and I pulled up some code. They asked me about it. And so that was really cool. And then after that, it was just with some of the other staff managers and finally with the vice president of the applications group at my company.
Interesting. So your technical interview was just a walkthrough of the code that you wrote.
Yep. So
You
that
didn't
big
have to do
project that
any
I had
live
spent
coding. Yeah.
2 months building, and building in public about, I did not have to do any live coding. I just had to kind of walk them through the project, and then they were asking questions about how I did certain things and stuff like that.
Did you have to have in your interviews where you were doing live coding, with other opportunities?
I did for one, like, internship type application. That was earlier. It was a few months earlier than that one. And it kinda crashed and burned. It was horrific, but it was also my first one, so you kind of expect it on your first one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, even as somebody with maybe a little more extroverted personality, I find the live coding interviews incredibly intimidating.
Yeah.
Because as a software engineer, most of my job I actually spend completely alone,
Mhm.
being able to safely Google, read through documentation, Stack Overflow, Chat GPT,
Right.
and then not just coding live is intimidating, but even if I were to, be typing in a Word document in English, like I'm gonna be making, 10x more typos than I usually do.
Right.
So some companies, and this isn't the same for everybody, but some companies in a desire to embrace DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, actually
Mm.
offer multiple types of technical interviews. So in that first recruiter screen,
Mhm.
uh, I would recommend even just asking if there's like a take home assignment available. You kind of lucked out in that you were just walking through a code
Mhm.
base you already well knew, but the typical kind of introvert friendly technical interview that I've seen is for the take home assignments.
Yeah.
Okay, so when you were talking to and going through the code base there, how did that technical interview go when you were just talking through your own code base? Were there specific types of questions or things that they were looking for that maybe in hindsight, if you had practiced or been more prepared for, you could have spoken to more confidently?
Um, it's hard to remember now. It's been so long. I would say they started off just, I think I just walked them through the front end of like, here's what it looks like, here's what it does. And then we dove into the back end and we talked about, some uh like timed functions that I had written. That was something they weren't expecting, I think, to see since I was mostly a front end developer. And then how I hooked things with Firebase. They saw something that was like a CI/CD type. It
Or
was like a little
something?
DevOps pipeline, but that was actually not created by me. That was a Firebase, like kind of
Okay.
defaults to this when you set up a project with them. So
So they
I
were probably
tried to
more
be as
interested.
transparent with that as possible. Like, this is me. This is what was just already there, kind of thing. So trying to walk them
Sure,
through.
sure. What it sounds like to me, I just want to emphasize that it was more, they're looking at like at a higher level, the data flow of your
Mhm,
application and how
for
all the
sure.
components work together and the decisions that you made.
Right.
That's another thing I want to highlight too, at least for the juniors that I've worked with. Oftentimes people aren't looking at like the nitty gritty code or function level when they're doing, a review of your portfolio. Typically it's, what's the problem that you're solving? Does it look nice?
Yeah.
Um,
And then I think too,
and
just like, did you
yeah,
follow a tutorial or is this
yeah,
actually yours? Like, if you can speak
yeah.
about it and talk about those decisions, like you were saying, like they're gonna know that it's yours, not just something you found offline.
Yeah, so I just want to emphasize, like, it doesn't have to be this perfect portfolio project with 100% following solid principles and clean code. I mean, the
Right.
more you can, the better. But it's more a little more abstract and higher level in that these when you approach these interviews.
For sure. And it was far from polished and far from done. And so that even gave an opportunity then to talk about like, here's where I'm going with it. Here's some extra things I want to add and stuff like that. So they could see kind of where my brain was at with that.
Do you know how many other people they were interviewing at the same time?
I don't. They hired four of us, sorry. They hired
Okay.
4 of us, in, like, a cohort because they were trying to
Okay.
they're coming up with, like, a junior curriculum, like, kind of pipeline that they can put people through, and so there's 4 of us right now, or they're actually down to 3. There were 4 of us hired, there's 3 now,
Uh,
but
and what was the name of your company again?
Keller Schrader.
Keller
Right.
Strader. Okay. Well, now everybody knows, hey, they're actually working through a junior program here. Maybe down the road,
Yep,
we'll be able to get more new developers through this program.
for
That's
sure.
great. I'm glad that they're doing that. Not everybody's been focusing on supporting entry level talent. So definitely
No,
kudos to them.
I think it's super smart and super, um, just good a business idea. Like, you're gonna hire all these junior talent, and they're gonna be pretty loyal to you for giving them a shot, and
Yeah.
you're training them specifically in your stack, so it's not like they're gonna come in and you're gonna have to then train them on the stack. Like, we're going through that program, and we're already gonna know the
Mhm.
stack and all that stuff.
And part of being a new developer that can be really intimidating for an introvert is when you land in that first job and you have absolutely no idea what you're doing. You don't know
Mhm.
anybody. The
Yeah.
code base is already established. Now you have to figure it out. And it can be scary reaching out and asking for help. If you were to look back on your first few days and you were to give some advice to your newly hired self, is there anything that you would say that you wish you had done differently to kind of help you get up to speed with the code base more or be more effective as a new software engineer?
Um, well, mine's a little bit different because we didn't get introduced to their code base, and I still have not been introduced to most of the things, but, um I would say just there's a fire hose of information those first few days, weeks, whatever. And so taking really good notes that you can go back to and just starting asking questions early is probably the best idea. Just to get
Yeah,
yourself, jumped right in.
Yeah, and it's important to remember that everybody wants you to succeed. The
Mhm.
company didn't hire you wanting you to fail. Your manager didn't assign you to that team wanting you to fail. Your tech lead didn't, assign you that task because they want you to fail. Everybody wants you to succeed, and I know it can be intimidating as a new developer, feeling like, oh, I'm bothering people by
Right.
pestering them with questions. Well, they
But when they
want you to
hire you,
ask
they know,
questions.
yeah, they know that you're gonna be doing that and they expect it. I
Yeah,
think it
they
would be
know you
weird if
don't
you
know their
didn't.
code base.
Yeah.
Yeah, so don't be intimidated at all. All right. So then, last question as well. So now, in your current shoes, look back at the beginning of your job search.
Mhm.
You haven't started that mentorship program yet. You're nervous as you look forward to all of these conversations you're going to have to have. What words of advice would you have for an introvert starting out for how they can navigate the job search in a way that they can feel comfortable?
Okay, I would say, um, to just give yourself a lot of time and don't expect it to go quickly, and that's obviously anybody. Um, and then just give yourself lots of breaks because one thing being an introvert is, like, when there's too much people stuff going on, when you're in a big group or when you've got an interview or any of those things, like, you need breaks and you need that, like, downtime afterwards to kinda, like, recharge, and so I would say programming those in, even, like, you have an interview or a coffee chat, like, give yourself time before and after to prepare, um, like I was saying, and then to, like, just kinda debrief afterwards and give yourself that downtime. I would say
Very
that's one of
good.
the biggest ones because it's gonna be a long haul, so things
It's
like
a marathon, not a sprint. Especially people are taking months, years to find that first job in tech right now.
yeah,
It's difficult, so you want to make sure that it's sustainable. Whatever
for
you do
sure.
in your job search, it's sustainable. Well, thank you, Allison, for the time. That's all that we have for today. So I just want to say thank you to joining and thank you to all that are listening. We will catch you all next time.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to the Junior Jobs Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe as that helps us reach more developers in need. And don't forget to check the show notes for details on today's sponsor and other job search services that we provide.